Welcome to Asia Outlook. I'm Melody and I'm here to report the top stories from around Asia. It's being called a celebration like no other in China's history. The military parade commemorating the 70th anniversary of the People's Republic of China began Tuesday morning at Beijing Tiananmen Square. 15,000 military personnel and thousands of spectators, some of them foreign guests, took part in the biggest National Day celebration in China. CGTN reporter Tang Bo has more.
A 70-gun fire salute, signaling the start of a day that will not soon be forgotten. A day of celebrations, complete with national flag raising and a parade, the largest of its kind. President Xi Jinping's morning keynote speech touched upon China's development over the years and the challenges that lie ahead.
In the past 70 years, all the ethnic groups in the country have, with the same heart and mind, strived hard to reach great achievements that have impressed the world. Today, socialist China is majestically standing in the east of the world. No power can shake our great nation's status. No power can stop the Chinese people and nation from stepping forward.
President Xi inspected the participating troops, thanking each of them for their hard work in upholding China's safety and sovereignty. The soldiers responded in unison by saying, "Serve the people." The eye-catching military parade started right after the troop inspection. In total, 59 formations, with more than 160 aircraft and 580 pieces of military equipment were featured in the parade. New weapons with a high level of artificial intelligence and better striking accuracy were displayed, including the HQ-6 gun missile defense system, CJ-100 cruise missiles, and DF-41 intercontinental ballistic missiles. 40% of the armaments were shown to the public for the first time. The military parade was then followed by a civilian procession that featured 36 formations, comprised of some 100,000 people from all walks of life, along with 70 floats. The civilian parade took the stage to showcase some historic turning points in China's development over the years, including the opening up policies, the one country, two systems model shared with Hong Kong, and 2008 Beijing Summer Olympic Games. Provinces, municipalities, autonomous regions, as well as special administrative regions also took the opportunity to demonstrate their economic growth on float vehicles. Having seen some of the previous National Day celebrations, this one today seems like the best yet. It's the biggest, has the largest number of participants, spectators, and weapons. However, it is not about flexing the nation's muscles, as the Ministry of National Defense says, but demonstrating China's commitment of maintaining regional stability and world peace. And for me, it's an integration of art and technology and so much more.
India has held off on imposing a blanket ban on single-use plastics. Officials worried it would be too disruptive as the country faces an economic slowdown and job losses. For now, the government will instead ask individual states to enforce existing rules against storing, manufacturing, and using some single-use plastic products. Our correspondent Ravinda Bawa has more from Delhi.
This one is the tallest rubbish mountain in India. Thousands of tons of plastic generated every day ends up here. Single-use plastic has become one of the biggest sources of pollution, impacting the ecological balance. To reduce plastic waste, the government is campaigning against it.
My government has announced that India will put an end to single-use plastic in the coming years.
This announcement has created panic, especially among the plastic manufacturers. A ban would mean job losses in an economy that is seeing unemployment at a 45-year high.
This is a reactionary approach. The objective should have been that you should, or the government, the industry is ready, all the stakeholders should have come together and strengthened the plastic waste management.
India faces an enormous plastic waste problem and has no easy way to dispose of the 9.4 million tons it generates per year.
The biggest issue presently is that the waste management is not sorted. We're hardly able to get segregated wet and dry waste. It's only if you get very clean streams that you can send them for recycling. Even on the industrial front, we don't know if there are alternatives to multi-layered packaging worldwide.
The news of plastic ban is good news for those in the business of alternative solutions. The bulk orders for making cloth bags for this unit has gone up by 40%.
The government should have seen the availability of alternatives on the grassroots level. We are getting huge demand for bags, and organizations like us cannot fulfill the demand. And we have increased the capacity and infrastructure to meet the demand.
Whether India will say goodbye to single-use plastic or not, but the war against plastic has begun here. Ravinder Bawa, CGTN, Delhi.
The Democratic People's Republic of Korea confirmed it launched a ballistic missile from a submarine. State media reports that the new missile, known as Pokguk-song-3, was fired off the country's eastern coast. Leader Kim Jong-un did not attend the test but did send his congratulations to the team. This launch comes after a day when Pyongyang and Washington agreed to hold talks later this week. Our reporter Joseph Kim has more now from Seoul.
As we've heard from South Korea's presidential office on Wednesday, the DPRK appears to have fired off a submarine-launched ballistic missile. Now, if we look at the pictures that came out from the DPRK state media, we see that it was fired from an underwater platform and not a submarine. But regardless, this does mark the first time since August 2016 that the DPRK has tested an SLBM. Now, South Korea's National Security Council has expressed strong concerns over the launch, while Japan's prime minister said that it violated UN sanctions, especially because the missile flew within Japan's exclusive economic zone. One thing that analysts are saying that is very concerning to them, especially here in South Korea, is that this is the first strategic missile that the DPRK has tested, meaning that it's the first missile capable of carrying a nuclear payload. And this is the first time since November 2017. And according to these experts, especially given the fact that this was a solid fuel rocket, it does mean that the DPRK is significantly improving its missile technology.
More than 1,600 people have died in monsoon season in India this year. Flooding caused massive power and water outages in the eastern city of Penta on Wednesday. Around 2 million residents were affected. Rescuers are trying to move injured people out of waterlogged homes. These monsoon rains are the heaviest India has seen in 25 years. Shinzo Abe says both countries have entered a new era of development and congratulated China on the 70th anniversary of the People's Republic.
Japanese leader Shinzo Abe speaks from personal experience, saying China has gone through great changes during the past decades.
Things have changed greatly in China. Comparing what I saw last year to my first visit in 1980, I believe all the tremendous changes wouldn't have taken place without the efforts of the Chinese people.
Abe says economic cooperation has made great progress since the formal establishment of ties in 1972, and he expects it to grow.
China is now Japan's largest trading partner. More than 30,000 Japanese companies have set up branches in China. Economically, we have become closer and more interdependent than ever.
He says the two sides should also diversify their fields of cooperation.
The Tokyo Olympics and Paralympics will be held next year. I believe the Chinese athletes will do very well. And the 2022 Winter Olympics will be held in Beijing. I think we should take these opportunities and enhance cooperation in sports, along with other forms of people-to-people exchanges.
The Japanese Prime Minister is also upbeat about Chinese President Xi Jinping's state visit to his country.
The Japanese people sincerely welcome President Xi to our country. Japan has now entered the Reiwa era, and the PRC has just celebrated its 70th anniversary. I hope President Xi's visit can be a new starting point in our relations.
African swine fever is spreading fast across Asia, including in South Korea. At least 9 separate cases have been confirmed there in less than 2 weeks, and that number is rising by the day. Officials have culled thousands of pigs in a bid to stop the spread of the disease, but animal rights groups are criticizing the government's measure. Shane Hans reports.
South Korea is in a fight to stop the spread of African swine fever. And as more and more farms are affected, authorities race quicker to limit the damage to livestock and farms. Standard procedures require pigs and hogs to be culled and buried. But these images obtained from local animal rights groups tell a different story.
We could see pigs in a conscious state kicking and screaming while being forklifted before being buried alive. Doing this to these pigs while they're still alive actually increases the risk of spreading the disease through saliva or blood from the scars of these pigs.
Rights groups claim the government relies on private firms to carry out the work. But these firms fail to follow standard procedures and are rather focused on quickly disposing of the animals. Groups claim these methods are inhumane and violate local animal protection laws.
When culling animals, shortening the time it takes to cull is the most important, and thus lessening the pain these animals suffer. But preventing the spread of this virus is also important. In order to do this, standards of procedure must be adhered to, and private workers must be properly trained.
Quarantine officials have initiated movement bans at pig farms nationwide to try and stop the spread of the disease. All the confirmed cases so far have occurred at farms in the northern part of the country. When reached for comment, government officials maintain that standards of procedure are being strictly followed. There's no doubt, however, that authorities are looking to stop the spread of African swine fever swiftly.
The Prime Minister has called for near excessive resolve and the need for quick preemptive measures. He's also given orders for quarantine measures that surpass pre-existing frameworks and manuals.
Officials say they plan to cull up to 60,000 pigs, and that number could go up if the disease continues to spread. Now, fortunately, experts say the virus poses little harm to humans when consumed, but the long-term consequences could be far-reaching, especially the economic implications for pig farms, distributors, and food industry workers. Shane Ham, CGTN, Seoul.
This is Asia Outlook, broadcasting from Myanmar International Radio. You can visit our website at miradio.com.mn. You can also listen to our radio programs live on the website. If you're on FM, make sure you catch us on 96.1 FM in Yangon, 96.5 in Mandalay, and 96.7 in Naypyidaw. You can also download MI Radio app on both iOS and Android devices for your own convenience. In South Korea, 18 people are injured after a massive explosion started a fire on an oil tanker in the port of Ulsan. 25 people were on board the tanker when the blast took place on Saturday morning, triggering a ball of fire and thick smoke. The blaze then spread to a nearby ship carrying a crew of 21. The injured include 12 sailors and 6 rescuers, mostly from burns and smoke inhalation. The cause of the explosion is under investigation. Japan has raised its consumption tax from 8 to 10% to cover increasing social welfare costs. However, the government attempts to soften the blow to consumers, including the introduction of a reduced tax rate of 8% for certain goods, are causing confusion in Japan. CGTN's Terence Terashima has more.
Japan introduced new tax system on Tuesday, raising a consumption tax from 8 to 10% on all products, except in some cases for food and beverages. But there is plenty of scope for misunderstanding. Food and non-alcoholic beverages will be taxed at a different rate depending on where you eat them, on the premises of the shop or restaurant, or to go. For example, sushi takeaway remains at 8%, but you will be charged 10% if you eat it at the restaurant. Many shop owners are worried that the new tax system may lead to confusions amongst the consumers. It seems it is even more confusing for foreign visitors to understand the differences clearly, especially in a place like the fish market where there are almost no boundaries between the stalls and the street.
I think it'll be a bit confusing because so little stuff that you see is actually explained in English that adding another level of complication, yes, it will be confusing.
Don't really see a reason for there to be two different levels of taxes. I mean, the difference between eating at a place or eating, taking the food with you, it seems kind of weird to me. It seems to me it's kind of a way to get the people away from the restaurants, and in my head that could be bad for business.
Worried about the possible dampening effect on the economy, the government has introduced stopgap measures such as point reward program for cashless payments to absorb the impact, but that has only complicated the matters further.
Most people know the new tax system, but very few consumers understand the practical implementation.
Experts worry that problems related to the new tax system may appear as time goes by.
I suppose it can be slightly confusing, but I think there is a similar scheme in other countries as well where you do pay higher tax when it's consumed inside compared to consuming outside. But I suppose it's the end of the day, it's raising tax for the government to be used as they see fit, I suppose.
Experts say the decision to raise the consumption tax on October the 1st based on Japan's political calendar. It's also a mistake. They say the timing should have been decided according to the economic need. How it impacts Japan's consumers and the government finances will help determine who's right. Terence Terashima, CGTN, Tokyo.
Russia has rolled out the red carpet for embattled Chinese tech company Huawei, letting it develop 5G networks in the country. Analysts say the move is as much of a show of solidarity with China over its dispute with the U.S. as it is a drive to bring ultra-high-speed internet to domestic users.
I think there is no big difference whether to use Huawei devices or whether to use Ericsson or some other vendor.
We have been working in Russia for 22 years. Thanks to our partners, we live well here.
This month, Huawei opened its first 5G test zone in Moscow in partnership with Russian operator MTS, with a view to rolling out the service to the rest of the capital. Moscow authorities say the network will become part of the city's normal infrastructure within the next few years. A pioneer in telecoms networks compared to many Western countries, Russia plans to deploy 5G in all of its main cities by 2024.
Moving to the Iran nuclear deal now, Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif says his country is willing to negotiate with the U.S. on its nuclear program, but only if it agrees to keep in place the deal it already signed. Zarif was speaking to NBC News during a visit to the United Nations.
Would negotiate with this administration?
Of course we would.
And you still would cut a deal with President Trump?
Not a new deal. They have to show that they respect their signature. Unless they show that they respect their signature, there is no point in negotiating with them, because you set a bad precedent. You renegotiate an already negotiated issue with this administration, there is no end to that, because tomorrow they can come back to you, even the same administration, and tell you this was not enough. Let me tell you about USMCA. Mexico allowed President Trump to renegotiate NAFTA. They reached USMCA, but then President Trump said, unless you agree to some of my demands on immigration, I will not implement USMCA. So there is no end. Somebody starts bullying, and the more you give to that bully, the more it wants.
As Indonesia's biggest protests in 2 decades continue, President Joko Widodo has called on the police to act with restraint. He's also promised an investigation into the death of 2 student protesters. The unrest was sparked by a controversial bill that could limit press freedom, criminalize abortion and premarital sex. CGTN Selinkina Aluaya has more from Jakarta.
Thousands of students across Indonesia are protesting over a controversial bill that dates back to the Dutch colonial rule. The set of proposed changes could soon be passed into law. Part of the bill states that consensual sex between unmarried people will be banned. Couples would also not be allowed to live together unless they were married. Abortion will be illegal and carry a heavy punishment, including a 4-year jail sentence. Limitations on freedom of speech, especially for the press, is included in the bill as well. Overall, there are more than 15 articles activists say are very problematic. This has created a widespread public outcry. President Joko Widodo has since called on the House of Representatives to delay the passing of the bill and to take the people's concerns into consideration. If the bill is passed, it could affect everyone in Indonesia, including tourists. That is what experts want the government to think about, because tourism plays a big role in Indonesia's economic growth, especially in the island of Bali. The fate of this bill is still uncertain and supposedly unlikely that it will be passed in its current form, because President Joko Widodo said that more input is needed before moving forward. The most important thing right now is to reduce public tensions and to make sure that these protesters are being heard. Silkina Aluwalia, CGTN, Jakarta.
Thousands of giant mirrors installed in northwest China's Gansu province, able to flexibly tilt towards the sun, were used to form celebratory messages for the 70th founding anniversary of the People's Republic of China. Pakistan and the Taliban are calling for peace talks to resume as soon as possible. Pakistan Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi met with a co-founder of Taliban, Mullah Ghani Barbadar, in Islamabad on Thursday. Qureshi said negotiations were the only way to establish peace in Afghanistan. United States President Donald Trump called off talks last month after a Taliban bombing in Afghanistan. The United States has long considered Pakistan cooperation crucial to efforts to end the war in Afghanistan. This is Asia Outlook broadcasting from Myanmar International Radio. You can visit our website at miradio.com.mm. You can also listen to our radio programs live on the website. If you're on FM, make sure you catch us on 96.1 FM in Yangon, 96.5 in Mandalay, and 96.7 in Naypyidaw. You can also download MI Radio app on both iOS and Android devices for your own convenience. turning out to Indonesia, where a 6.5 magnitude earthquake has claimed the lives of 30 and injured 156 as of Sunday. On Thursday, the tremor sent buildings falling and terrified residents into the streets of the country's eastern Maluku province. Landslides triggered by the quake buried at least one of the victims. Tsunami fears and potential damage to houses amid frequent aftershocks have forced over 25,000 residents to flee their homes. The region's governor has declared a state of emergency and temporary tents and kitchens set up for local evacuees. The top rivals in the Afghan presidential election have claimed victory, even though official counting is still underway. Early results show incumbent President Ashraf Ghani and his government's chief executive, Abdullah, are tied. CGTN's Jack Barton has more from Kabul.
Kabul has grown quiet as Saturday's presidential election draws near. Campaigning has stopped, and the Taliban has again warned it will attack polling stations to disrupt the vote. More than ever, Afghanistan feels like a divided nation, except on one issue. After almost 19 years of conflict, neither side has gained the upper hand. The broad consensus here now is that only a peace agreement will bring an end to the war. Many Afghans believe there should not be an election until a peace deal is in place.
They haven't enough time because of peace negotiations to see the programs of candidates very well and to decide very well that which one of these candidates is better for the future of Afghanistan.
US President Donald Trump recently called off talks with the Taliban, talks that did not include the Afghan government. Afghan women in particular want to know what a deal with the Taliban would mean if dialogue resumes.
Women are afraid of the type of government that Taliban has before.
Supporters of the Taliban say part of the deal would be controlling key ministries.
Because they have fought for it. Otherwise, once they reach a political agreement and enter the political system, they will not be able to implement the goals they hope to achieve in Afghanistan.
The Taliban remain a real threat to moderate Afghans, though they do appear to share one concern.
The view of the candidates themselves is that this is not an election. It is rigged. We don't believe in the transparency of the election. For example, the parliamentary election that took place a couple of months ago. Everyone was taking money and bribes in front of us all.
One person who does believe the election should go ahead is President Ashraf Ghani.
We do have concerns about the fraud. We do have concerns about insecurity. But still, some election is better than no election at all.
The US stepped in to broker a unity government after EU observers and the main presidential contenders alleged widespread irregularities and fraud in the 2014 election. The common desire among people who do support the electoral process is that the upcoming poll looks nothing like the last and provides a clear direction in which peace can finally have a chance. Jack Barton, CGTN, Kabul.
And that's all we have for you today on Asia Outlook on MI Radio. Thank you for being with us. I'm Melody. We'll be back next week. Until next time.